I've been getting into arguments on Twitter and I want to complain about them. That's the whole point of having a podcast, isn't it?
Oh my god, we're gonna talk about fucking Twitter.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Weeb Crew. I'm your host, Psyotic, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host, Mumi.
Salutations, Psyotic. I am Mumi. How are you?
And on today's episode of the Weeb Crew, we actually are going to be discussing a topic submitted by one of our listeners on our Discord server. So today, Mumi, our topic comes from John Falco, Mercury Falcon, who asked us, can we get a Weeb Crew episode on Andrew Dobson's list of characters he refuses to do inflation porn of? And he has sent us a list of these characters right here. Mumi, what do you think about these characters? Now, he says he will not draw, for example, inflation porn of Ranma, the female version specifically.
Well, as you can see, he also will not draw inflation porn of Akane or Lum or Inuyasha, but then he also has an entry for any character from Rumiko Takahashi. So there's a lot of overlap. There's
a fair amount of redundancy here, but at the same time, I feel like that gives it more of a through line.
In some ways, yes, I can see that.
So for Akane, they say they love Ranma 1/2. It's a great series. However, they cannot bear to inflate any of the characters save for the exception of Shampoo, possibly, because they love it so much. They do not think that Akane looks good with big breasts either. And then for Ranma, specifically, they say for the same reasons as Akane, but with a twist. To them, female Ranma is male Ranma. Thus, inflating the female one really freaks them out. I don't think of it ill. They don't want to think so ill of a series they hold so dear.
Bit sucks.
What, do you not like NPR inflation porn? Do you not like just reading this as if we're like we went to like a school of radio broadcasting?
I feel like we've just filtered like half the people.
Oh well, fuck them. They don't deserve to listen to us anyway. Hello and welcome to the Weeb Crew. I'm your host Psyotic, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host Mumi.
If you can't handle us at our worst, you don't deserve us at our best.
Honestly, yeah. If you're a new listener and you made it through that, welcome to the podcast. You can stick around, and if you want to submit any topics for us, join the Discord server. But the real reason, Mumi, is because I have a very interesting topic for today's episode that is going to attract a lot of annoying people potentially. So we want to just get them. We want to fucking get them out of here as soon as possible. All right.
They're trying to filter them out.
Yeah. All right. We need to gatekeep this podcast.
I see.
Yeah.
That's always advantageous for a podcast to just gatekeep your audience.
To just make it kind of frustrating to listen to and just unpleasant. So that way the only people listening by now are the real fans.
The real ones.
The real ones. So what are we talking about today, Mumi?
I don't know. What are we talking about today?
The topic idea was mine. I've been getting into arguments on Twitter and I want to complain about them. That's the whole point of having a podcast, isn't it?
Oh my god, we're going to talk about fucking Twitter.
Yeah. Well, Mumi, I'm sorry. I shouldn't dead name it. X.
Oh, that's totally different. Okay.
Yeah. Well, no, I think so. Today I kind of want to talk about there's been a lot of discourse lately, I guess, around like what constitutes an anime fan, how do you determine if someone is an anime fan? Mm-hmm. And I had this Twitter thread that I put up a few days ago that people were like discussing, and I had like an argument with a couple people But I think it's a really interesting topic and definitely one worth like talking about, certainly, especially because I don't know if it's really that clear who is and who isn't an anime fan nowadays.
Can't believe we're doing another gatekeep episode.
No, this is not a gatekeeping episode. And this is, this is more so on like the actual like, well, who are the fans to begin with? We don't need to talk about like, do we need to be gatekeeping anime?
So unlike other gatekeeping podcasts, this one's about the fans.
Listen, guys, here at the Weeb Crew, this is an anime podcast ran by fans for fans. Fans of what? That's right, you guessed it, inflation porn.
We have not received one dime from aid, all right?
Whoa, like we're a podcast funded by USAID or whatever?
Yeah, USAID, that's what I was thinking of.
That was another podcast idea that I had. It was like, oh yeah, we're the only podcast funded by the U.S. federal government. Till Elon Musk cut off our funding, and now fuck him. Honestly,
we could talk about it before. We were
raking in millions. All right,
millions on our 50 people episode.
Listen. All right, we get like 100 or some downloads with every podcast episode. All of them are members of the deep state. Keep that in mind. If you want to shit talk us on Twitter, guess what? We can have your family assassinated.
Yeah, they're the people. The few people listening are the real ones.
We have connections in high places. Okay, we've had Robert Woodhead on our podcast.
Air quotes. Real ones.
Real ones. Yeah, I think it's interesting in terms of like who is an anime fan nowadays, because I feel like everyone below the age of 30 has seen at least one anime by now, it feels like. I mean, I say this, but I was talking with a coworker a while back. He did not even know what One Piece was. I said it to him and he was like, "What's that?" I'm like, "What?" He also did not know what Charizard was. Like, he asked us like who our favorite Pokemon was, and I was like, "Oh yeah, I like Mimikyu." And he was like, "I like the what's it called? The giant orange dragon one." I'm like, how do you not?
How old is this individual?
Not even know what Charizard is.
How old are they?
They are like a year younger than me. So like,
what the fuck?
Yeah. No, this is not an old person by any means. And it's not like they are like, oh, they're just like super normal. Like they don't pay attention to any media. They just somehow do not pay attention to like anything like video game related, I guess, or anime. I don't know, honestly. Because like, you do not need to have even the remotest awareness of anime to know what like One Piece is. You could hear One Piece and literally be like, oh, that live action Netflix show? How does that not come to your head? That live action show has like, I think like probably the biggest advertising budget in Netflix history. They put so much money into promoting that shit.
I don't know. I feel like I can mention One Piece to my coworkers, and I don't know if anyone would actually know what I was talking about.
Maybe. I mean, do you work with like a lot of younger people though?
We have hired a lot of young people recently.
Okay. I don't know, Mumi, you should start asking them. Start asking them if they've seen One Piece.
I probably could. I could probably squeeze like saw this thing on Netflix the other day. It's called One Piece.
I mean, one of your coworkers like confirmed like at least seen like what, JoJo?
No, they asked me about Cowboy Bebop because my lanyard said Cowboy Bebop, and I was like, oh yeah. Old Toonami show.
Yeah. Another one of my coworkers, they went to like Japan a while back. We were talking about it. And I think I just said, I was like, oh yeah, are you like a fan of like manga or anything? And they're like, that's how you say it? He's like, I've been saying manga the entire time. And it's like, oh, that's fine. I didn't want to then also then drop on. No, because like it's funny if you look at someone who said, well, this is a good example. Someone who says manga, it's what's known as a shibboleth. Okay. It's like
Cthulhu
it's something like a signifier that tacitly like clues you in on who's in the in group and who's in the out group. You know, if they can't say manga correctly, they're not a real fan. Meanwhile, fucking everyone says anime instead of anime. Actually, if you say anime, people will call you fucking weird. So
I feel like you just described the plot of Shadow over Innsmouth.
Okay, cook that one. Elaborate.
Well, you said you know it's what you call it, the Shiggleboff.
Oh, Shibboleth. Oh, you mean like?
And then you
mean Shub Nigrath or something?
I'm sorry, you can't say that.
What the fuck is it called? I was gonna.
It's
that is literally how it is pronounced, Mumi.
Oh my god.
Listen, do not blame me if H.P. Lovecraft is out here naming things Shub Nigrath, all right?
I was thinking
just because he puts like how else am I supposed to say it? He's the one putting slurs and everything.
That's all right. What's the name of his cat? There you go.
That's what you're thinking of. But no, so like there's a good Adam Neely video on it about the jazz reel book, and he uses like the word shibboleth, and I think it's like a religious term initially. Yeah. Shibboleth has multiple meanings, including a word used in the Bible, a way to identify a group, and a company that helps financial institutions with compliance.
Interesting.
A shibboleth is any custom or tradition, usually a choice of phrasing or single word that distinguishes one group of people from another. So there we go. Yeah. Perfect example of a shibboleth. This is an educational podcast, okay? Shibboleth, there's your word of the day, and you got your example. People who say the word manga instead of saying it manga.
If we didn't get our funding cut by the government, we could have used that USD aid funding to have like a whole like soundboard where you go, you said the secret word.
I could censor stuff on the fly if I had a soundboard. Instead of you needing to go back and doing it. If you want to listen to this podcast uncensored, by the way, check us out on Patreon.
Yeah, we talked for like 20 minutes about fucking Aquarion.
Yeah. No one knows what Aquarion is. Like that show has like fewer than 4,000 members on my anime list. No one knows what Aquarion. That's not a attractive proposition to be like, hey guys, listen to us talk about Aquarion. They're gonna go, what the fuck is Aquarion? Why would I pay you to hear you talk about that?
But like the aquarium?
Yeah, you guys go. Wow, you guys really are gay, going to an aquarium and stuff.
It was just
they
like
go to an aquarium in the show.
Yeah,
it's not gay. It's actually incest. It turns out
spiritual incest. They're like spiritual siblings.
Yeah, everyone is into anime nowadays. It feels like so. To a certain extent, you know, back in the day, if you had seen any anime, getting a hold of like basically any anime and being able to watch it was already such like a arduous and annoying task. You know, you had to know a guy who knows a guy. You know what I mean? Like back in like the 90s.
I feel like you didn't ever have anyone that had just seen one anime though.
Yeah.
Like now you probably could run into someone that had only seen like, oh, I heard about this My Hero Academia show, so I checked it out and it was all right.
Yeah. Or no, I've talked to people like, oh yeah, I've seen like One Punch Man or April. What's the April anime with the piano?
Your Lie in April.
Sad. Yeah, Your Lie in April. Stuff like that. You know, I've had people like say like, I don't watch a lot of anime, but I've seen like those two shows. So like,
I feel like it's ubiquitous enough though, where it's like having seen an anime doesn't make you like a fan. I mean, if you want to call yourself one, I think that's fine. But
I don't care that
people
much,
have seen like I've seen like a shit ton more baseball games, and I fucking hate baseball.
Oh yeah, guys, I'm a really big football fan. I watched the Super Bowl.
Yeah,
for Kendrick Lamar. It's in it. Well, it then begs the question: like, if one anime is enough, then it's like, it's almost like if everyone's an anime fan, then no one is. So at that point, I don't think that's a really productive way to think about it.
Well, I guess it's more of like how you identify. I guess, like,
right. Well, yeah.
It's not necessarily that. I mean, obviously, there's a qualifier if you have to have seen an anime to be an anime fan. If you've never watched an anime before, you can't. Can you really be calling yourself an anime fan?
There we go. That is the absolute biggest baseline. Is you need to have seen at least one anime to be an anime fan.
But and like even then, that's not the qualifier to be an anime. That's just like
no, that is like the most like basic thing that you could do, though.
Yeah, but at that point, if you've seen one, if you then identify as one, it's like okay,
yeah.
Now we're having a conversation.
But so my point is, this is like what I talked about in like that Twitter thread. Is like obviously there are so many things though that like are not anime but are still like related to anime. So many like anime are part of like these broader media mixes. That it's like okay. If you are a fan, can you be like a fan of Evangelion, for example, but you've never actually seen the original Evangelion? You've interacted with like a ton of other stuff. You played like some of the video games. Maybe you've read some of the manga, but you've never seen the anime. Are you an Evangelion fan?
Potentially.
Like that's like the tricky question to answer. And it's not something that you can just kind of apply to every franchise, like Pokemon, for example. You can be a Pokemon fan and have never seen the anime. You could be a Pokemon fan and have never played the games. If you only interact with like, you know, one of the like, are you a fan of Pokemon and you do it through like the card game, or maybe you only like watch the anime, or maybe you only play the video games.
I mean, Yu-Gi-Oh's that way. You could be a fan of the game and never have played the anime, or sorry, played the anime.
I've certainly never played the Pokemon anime before. No, I think I actually have. I think I remember watching a Pokemon DVD that, do you remember, like there were like DVD games where you would play it with like the remote control and stuff?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there were a number of those for Pokemon back in the day, and I think I played one of those.
Yeah, that's what I was referencing.
Played the Pokemon anime.
Yeah, I was referencing that. Deep cut.
Yeah, it's a lot trickier of a question. Like, how can you be a fan of Hatsune Miku, for example? How can you be a fan of Hello Kitty? How can you be a fan of these things where it's like, we can look at Evangelion and say like, okay, well, like the anime, the TV show from the 90s is like the central pillar of the franchise. I don't really agree with that claim, but it's nonetheless a claim that can be made.
Mm-hmm.
What the fuck is the central pillar of Hatsune Miku or Hello Kitty? I don't think there isn't really one, is the thing. So in that sense, it becomes a lot more, it's more up in the air, I think.
That does bring in like an interesting question, like a concept, I guess, where like I've noticed when people like criticize merchandise people have, right? They'll point out like, oh, you have fucking shit ton of Hatsune Miku figures. And I imagine part of that is because, one, obviously they make a lot of Hatsune Miku merchandise. So like,
yeah,
chances are they've made a piece of merchandise. So you might be like, hey, it looks pretty cool.
Yeah.
But also it is such like a low bar of entry. Because like as you pointed out, like there's not like a pillar, there's not really like a canon to Hatsune Miku that like someone's gonna press you on. Like someone that's really into Vocaloids might be able to be like, oh yeah, I'll name 5 Hatsune Miku songs, and then you look like the fucking Nirvana guy.
That, if they're like a fan of Vocaloids in general, they're gonna start quizzing you about fanloids. At which point I'm gonna be like, I'm sorry.
Well,
I don't know anything. There's a yellow one.
I was gonna make a joke. I don't think I can make that joke on this podcast.
But then, I mean, you say it's like it's like a quote unquote low barrier to entry. But then it's like, if we say that like it's a question of like who is an otaku and who is not, are we gonna look at the guy who fucking married Hatsune Miku and be like, yeah, he's not. I mean, it's so Hatsune Miku's so normie, he's not a real otaku. Like, I feel like that would be an insane claim to make about that guy. You fucking married Hatsune Miku. What have you done with your life?
Married my wife.
Your wife actually hates you and is cheating on you, all right?
Oh.
You need to dump that pig and get yourself a 2D girlfriend.
3D PD.
3D PD.
But like, yeah, it's like, it's a valid, like, what's the word? Like observation to make, where it's like,
yeah,
you know, if you're quantifying or like trying to qualify your fandom, and you're like, look, I collect merch, and it is like Hatsune Miku. Having Hatsune Miku merch, I guess, is like on the lower end of the totem pole of like qualifying where you are on the scale, I guess, right?
Oh, I don't think that it is. I think it's that people think that it is, and I think that's kind of the thing. Is like when you have this sort of like when you're trying to set these sorts of bars, you know, these things that people need to like fulfill, requirements people need to meet in order to be a quote unquote real fan. It's almost like you can just set it so arbitrarily. Like Hayden had a thread, and they were like showing off their room and all the shit that they own and all the anime they've seen and all the research they've done. And they still got people replying to them being like, dude, that doesn't fucking mean anything. You're not a real fan.
Well, I feel like that person was just like saying that because they knew it would get their goat, right?
Well, sure, but it's still like, it's so easy to do that. And it's like, you know, you can just basically be like, oh yeah, it doesn't matter how much you've seen. It doesn't matter, you know, how much you've spent, how much you've actually read and researched into this thing. I can still say you're not a fan by my own arbitrarily defined definition.
Well, I guess it goes to like the whole thing with like what you were talking about on X or whatever. It wasn't necessarily.
We don't need to actually call it X, by the way. Let's be clear about that.
That was the easier thing to say.
Listen. The USAID funding got cut. We got to call it X now.
Yeah, we're not woke
anymore. We were being
anymore.
paid by the government to call it Twitter.
We went woke, got broke, and now we're not being paid by Daddy Biden anymore.
Guys, please donate to our GoFundMe. We have a number of legal fees.
Oh my god.
Yeah. Jimmy, get back to us about our podcast invite.
The whole
you coward.
The whole like.
Don't leave us on not even read.
Not even read. The whole like debate wasn't even necessarily about whether or not they were actually quote unquote a anime fan. It was more from a place of like, I have deemed you to not be an anime fan, so I am going to point out ways I can disqualify you as being one. So it was like a retroactive process. Like if you had posted the same picture of this room without the context of what was going on around it, you have a different conversation. Like people aren't going to be sitting there and be like, you're not real an anime fan because you got some prize figures in front of mom on the shelf.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's literally just like, you know, you can pick out any small thing you want, and then it doesn't matter. That one thing immediately disqualifies you. It's the anime fan one drop rule. It's like
because I feel like you could make like critiques, I guess. Like it's a weird thing to say, but you could like point stuff out like that where it's like, well, you got a lot of prize figures, and those are pretty.
This is not anything that is necessarily bad. Is the thing? It's just that it's bad when annoying people do it. Like what was that?
Depends on where it's coming from. Like from what place, not necessarily who.
We watched. Do you remember that Jubilee video where it's like 6 real anime fans and 1 fake anime fan? It's like they have to like find out who the fake fan is or whatever.
And then they're like, oh, actually, one of y'all is helping them. You have to get both
or
of
like
them.
I don't know, but it's like they're like showing off like their merch and stuff or like what their favorite anime are. And I'm watching this and I'm just thinking, oh my god.
Well, I don't.
Like I still feel that sentiment from time to time where I see that sort of thing, and I'm just like, can you not have done better? Could you not have found better like people for this?
Because like you watch that and you realize so many people just engage in fandom so on like a very surface level.
Oh yeah, they're not people like us who are watching 20 like shows every season.
So like spoilers for that video, like the person who was a fake fan was like, oh yeah, I really like Sunny Boy and stuff like this. For someone like me, I would be like, oh, yeah, that was a good show. What did you think about it? And like start talking about the actual experience of having seen the show.
But no one else had seen Sonny Boy, had they?
No one in that group had. That's why he kind of got away with it. And it was like such a question because no one had seen. There's like, you're just listing random shit. I've never heard of this before in my life. And they actually, funny enough, they disqualified him and were able to like pinpoint who he was the imposter or whatever, because they just assumed he was just making up shit or something.
Oh, so like what you're saying, like, yeah, if one of us were on there instead, we would also just immediately get crucified, even though it's like, are we?
Well, no, because I've at least seen like the popular shit where I could talk about it.
Yeah. I mean, I have not seen the popular shit, but I could still fake a conversation reasonably well because I just know enough about stuff just through osmosis.
Like that whole thing is like, I feel like this doesn't work if you start engaging with it on like the show itself on a deeper, like you're just like, hey, what did you think about it? And they're immediately like, oh fuck, someone that's seen the show has asked me what it was like watching the show. I haven't seen.
You know what this reminds me of, actually? This is like when you go on those like AMQ tournaments. You just is. You just
like, oh, I love this show. What then like everyone guesses it right, and I'm like, oh, what did y'all think about it? Oh no, never seen it. My son of a bitch.
It's like you just get fucked because all these people have seen is like Naruto, so it's just Naruto opening. It's like, I don't know what Naruto opening that is.
No, there are people that like just play AMQ and like engage with the music through AMQ, and so like they will know like these obscure fucking 2008 OPs and EDs, and you're like, man, why did you watch that show? And they're like, no, I just played the game, and they just memorized all of them. And you're like,
oh, are they fake fans then? Is the question.
I guess it depends on how we're defining what kind of fan they are.
Yeah,
because I guess like in that, well, in that case, like, go ahead.
I was like, this is something like Thor pointed out is like, it's like a question. It's a problem of non-specificity where it's like, yeah, they're a fan of something, but what? What is that specific something? If you're just asking, are they a fan? It's like, well, yeah, but I don't necessarily know what you're referring to.
He's a fan. He's a fan. He a fan.
Man, he a fan. So that is like that. I mean, that again, it's a similar thing with like the Pokemon example, for example. Redundant. Where it's like, you know, are you a fan of Pokemon, the brand, if you only watch the anime, or you only play the games, or you only play the TCG? Or are you specifically a fan of the anime? Are you specifically a fan of the video game, or specifically a fan of the card game? How do you parse that? And does kind of being under that broader Pokemon umbrella then mean you are an overall Pokemon fan, or should you be more specific about that?
Well, and interestingly, you get stuff like Halo, right?
Yeah.
Like Halo is a game, and then like you're like, oh, I'm a fan of Halo, and then if someone comes along and is like, oh, I really like the books, you don't think they're a fan of the Halo books. You're like, oh, you're just a really big Halo fan.
Yeah.
So like you're not making these like weird qualifications for something like that in that case, but we are for something like Pokemon, which is like a medium, like a larger media mix, I should say.
Well, so even something like The Witcher, I think, is a really interesting example, because for the longest time, The Witcher books were not the most popular books. They were popular, but they were not like, I think they have become so much more popular in recent years.
Especially because of the games, yeah.
Because of the games, especially because of the Netflix series. Because obviously the video games very popular with gamers. The Netflix series so popular with like. I walked in on my dad watching it, and I was like, "Oh, you're watching The Witcher." He's like,
put that away, Dad.
Do anything about the video games? Didn't know anything. It was a show on Netflix. My sister watched the show on Netflix and then started reading the books. Does not care about the video games at all. I don't even know if she knows they exist. So then it's like, how do we talk about, like, another example? Cyberpunk. You got the anime, Cyberpunk Edge Runners. You got the video game, Cyberpunk 2077. Neither of those are the original properties for the Cyberpunk franchise. It's a goddamn tabletop game. How many people who are playing like the video game or have seen the anime would say they are fans of Cyberpunk, but they've never played the tabletop game before? And then how do we parse that?
Are they talking about the genre? Or are they talking about?
Well, that's also like, it's like, I mean, it's a name of like a property, but then also that became the name of the genre.
Yeah.
But it's a weird question to ask, because I mean, someone who tells me like, you know, they've read all of the Witcher books, I'd be like, yeah, they're a fan of the Witcher, even if they never played the games or even seen the Netflix show. Whereas, you know, if someone just told me like they were a fan of Cyberpunk and all they had seen was Edge Runners, I'd be like, oh, they're probably just a fan of Cyberpunk Edge Runners specifically. But if, you know, they tell me about the like tabletop games, I'd be like, oh, okay, then they are like a general like fan of the Cyberpunk franchise just based on that. So again, it's something that varies.
This is approaching it from like an outside perspective though. So like when you're something that I guess is more relevant to the discussion is when you're in the fandom, right? Because like if someone's like, I'm a Witcher fan, and then all they've played is the games, someone that's like really invested in The Witcher and has read the books and then watched the
someone
Netflix
who was
series
engaging
and
with a lot of the media mix,
right? Then they're going to be like, well, you're not a real Witcher fan. You're just like a fan of the games or something.
Yeah.
So it's like, where do we qualify and draw these lines?
It's like a question of like relativity and perspective at that point, where it's like from my perspective, someone who's seen, you know, only 100 anime, that's not a lot of anime from where I'm standing. But for a lot of people, if you tell them you've seen 100 anime, they'll call you a fucking weirdo just to your face. God forbid
there was 100 anime.
You should see the reactions I've gotten from people, and I've shown them like my Annie list, and there's like 1,000 anime on it.
That's why I don't show
like
people in real life anything.
Yeah, that's because you're an insecure fucking loser dork. All right, not a Giga Chad monster cock guy. Like
I gatekeep all the normies. All right?
I don't want to let anyone know about any of my I don't. They don't even know my last name at work, as it turns out. I don't tell them shit. Did I ever tell you I had a plan when I got this job? I wanted to convince my coworkers that I actually had a family.
Yeah, I remember this.
Yeah. I was gonna be like, oh yeah, I've got like a wife and kids at home.
just one day you just drop it on them.
Anytime they ask me to do anything, just be like, sorry, can't do it. I've got stuff, you know, family.
Got a soccer game I gotta go to.
A soccer game. That would be
you construct this whole narrative of like your child is like really into soccer. They're like going to play in some tournament. They get knocked out of the third round by like the best team in the region or something.
It's funny because like, really people will do that, but to like for like tax fraud, not just to specifically fuck with their coworkers.
Listen, you can engage in the moe culture where these coworkers are engaged and like invested in this child's life that doesn't exist.
The hell are you talking? What the fuck was that?
What?
That's an insane line of analysis for that thing. I think what I'm going to do now is I'm going to make it seem like I actually have like a latent, like a gambling problem, like a recovering gambling addict. Because when we were in Chicago for a business trip, you know, one of my coworkers wanted to play like poker, and he was really insistent that we actually bet with real money. And I was just kind of like, I don't want to do that. You know, it's just like, I don't really want to play poker for money, guys. Can we just not do that? And then I ended up just winning really hard while playing. And it was like, now I'm just kind of be like, can I then spin that into, I didn't want to gamble for money because I'm actually really good at gambling.
You didn't want to
and I don't want to fall off the wagon back into actually betting for money. I feel like that would be a funny bit.
I've been 3 years clean of my gambling addiction.
Just be like, I got really into online gambling during COVID, and it was a whole ordeal. So I'm just not comfortable gambling I can do it for fun, but yeah, just not for money. That would be such a horrible thing to gaslight your coworkers on.
Like that whole like stupid like dad lore shit that I kept getting on my feed for a while, where it's like, Dad just dropped the wildest lore. And,
God, yeah.
They're like watching the Beatles, and he's like, I was in the Beatles. And they're like, what?
But to get back to the topic at hand, another like we've been talking about official works so far, but another interesting like thing is like, well, what about fan works? What about doujin? Can you be a fan of something if you're only interacting with the fan created media? And the media theorist in me wants to be like, yeah, of course. When we talk about database consumption, when we talk about media mixes, then it kind of all exists on the same plane. Like I quoted Azuma in Database Animals, and he's basically talking about like how Evangelion was not a privileged original. It wasn't just this thing that existed, but rather was an entry point, not even the entry point, but an entry point into this broader media ecology that includes both official and unofficial works. So it's an interesting question now. Like, can you be a fan, for example, of Blue Archive, but not really play the game at all? But you still like your exposure to it primarily is through all the doujin stuff that is just, constantly popping off at Comiket every year. I don't have a good answer to that question, honestly. I think there are merits to both ways to look at it, where you could say that you're not a real Blue Archive fan if you haven't played the game. And I think there are, good reasons to think that. And I think there are good reasons to think the opposite as well, where it's like, you don't need to play the game to be a fan of Blue Archive.
I guess, like, you look at something like Toho or something.
Mm-hmm.
Toho is purely fan works, right?
Yeah.
So, like, you could be a fan of that, and that doesn't disqualify. Like, yeah. I guess that, like, by technical definition, does make it. Where I
guess in a case like that, though, it's like, can you be a Toho fan if you've never played a Toho game created by Zune?
I mean, that's literally just 90% of the fandom on Twitter.
This is true. I mean, yeah, well, it's this thing. So many people are fans of Toho, but have never, they're not really shoot 'em up fans. They are fans of Toho for so many other reasons. Maybe they played. I mean, there are so many Toho games. There are Toho games in like every goddamn genre. I swear to God. And that's their exposure to it. So then it's like, okay, if they are interacting with all of these other fan created things related to Toho, but even if they've never played the original shoot 'em up games, how are they a Toho fan? Are they a real fan? I don't know, honestly. And to a certain extent, it's also, I guess, not my place to answer that. I'm not a Toho fan myself. I'm not just a Toho guy, really, any capacity. But when it comes to like anime and stuff, or even like specific anime properties, I think that becomes a much more, I have a little bit more of a perspective on that.
I think it just ultimately is defined by the people who are in the space.
Mm-hmm.
But the people who are in the space cannot be trusted to define it. So it's
yeah.
Because like, I mean, you look at how people are gatekeeping it, and it's like they're not even like consistent. Like
no.
You're gatekeeping. Like, it's one thing if you're consistent in gatekeeping, right?
Yeah.
Like A or something would be more consistent, where it's like, oh, if you haven't seen more than X amount of anime, and that number would fluctuate.
There is no anime community in like a singular form. It just doesn't exist. And to a certain extent, it never really existed, but especially now, there is no singular anime community. No. And so, with a lot of the older people we talked to this about on the podcast, this is like something that they obviously, feel very strongly about. Like when they were, however many years ago, 10, 20, 30 years ago, and really into anime, it felt like there was much more of like a general anime community where, everyone had seen at least some amount of overlap, some amount of like similar things, and everything felt much more tight knit as a result. Whereas that doesn't really exist anymore, at least in the English speaking world.
I don't know if I like that you called them older and then said 20 years ago.
They were adults 20 years ago. We were children.
Yeah, but I was going to conventions 20 years ago.
You were going to conventions as a child.
I was like 12.
You are a child at 12 years old.
Yeah, but it's not like you're like a 7-year-old.
Mumi, no, we're not going to get into this. 12-year-olds are children.
That is not okay. That is not the fucking debate we're having.
Turns out we were the real pedophiles the whole time.
Oh no.
But that is something like they've talked about, and I think it's an interesting perspective to have. That it doesn't really exist anymore. So in that sense, and you can't really gatekeep the anime community. You can gatekeep anime specific spaces, certainly, like we've done, like with our Discord through just general like culture and then light moderation activity.
Yeah, and I've talked about it where it's like you can gatekeep successfully in a smaller space, and I think like there is a utility for gatekeeping a Discord server or a forum or whatever. But like if you're talking about like a greater community or greater space as a whole, it's impossible.
Well, none of these people are making anime. None of these people control the means of production for anime, so they have absolutely like no capacity to actually like determine who gets access to and who can actually like talk about and like engage with anime in any way.
Right. But it's also like all you accomplish in trying to gatekeep anime like that in like a large space is you just create echo chambers, because you're not preventing these people from getting into anime.
No, it will never work.
You're just preventing them from wanting to engage with you, which again, if you're wanting to do this in a community and just be in a bubble, that's fine. But if you're worried about like the greater sort of repercussions of being outnumbered in a community, that is not going to help you. It's just going to make you blindsided when it happens because you were in your little corner circle or whatever, the internet, and they were still having the same conversation just among themselves and you weren't involved. And then they're like, oh, good news. You're out.
and it diverges in a totally different direction. And I mean, you see this with like anime YouTube content as well, where it's like, or just in general, it feels like anime discussions kind of took a hard reset in 2020 when I think you got a lot of influx of people starting to watch and talk about anime. And those people hadn't necessarily been aware of like the conversation that was already happening. They did not, so to speak, lurk more, which I think that is a good gatekeeping strategy when it comes to communities. Is like, okay, you can engage with this stuff, but let's catch you up to speed a little bit. So that means, that brings a lot of things back into controversy, and people will act like they're new issues. They're not. People have always complained about anime in the exact same ways they do today. They were doing it in the early 90s. They were doing it through the 2000s, 2010s, into now. Nothing ever changes. Time is a flat circle.
That's what I was going to say, is like, it's not even like I don't even necessarily know if it changed significantly in any way in 2020. You just got an influx of newer people that were then doing the same thing we were also complaining about in 2010 or 2005 or name the year even. Like,
right. Yeah. I mean, it's always going to exist in any capacity as long as there are new people watching anime. Invariably, you're going to get some dipshit, some motherfucker who thinks they have an original take that they didn't bother to research, and they started spouting their opinion off online, and it's like, oh god, here we go again. That's just a hazard of the business, essentially. It's just going to happen, and to a certain extent you need to accept it, but then you also need to think about, how do we deal with that? How do we discuss that? Personally, I'm in favor of calmly and rationally and compassionately explaining that stuff to them that they may not necessarily be aware of, rather than like harassing them or telling them they're wrong or any shit like that.
Yeah, and that stuff doesn't really work long term.
No.
What works is equipping the people who want to be around you. And I don't mean that in the sense of like they want to hang out with you specifically, but the people who want to be in the space that you were in the fandom or whatever, equipping them in the best way you can to be an asset to what you view as like the positive sort of trajectory that you want the fandom to go into, right?
To a certain, like, it's a matter of like, you have to meet them halfway, and then they do as well. They have to be as willing to learn as you are to teach them. If you are someone who knows their stuff about anime or any other like fandom. So if you just kind of totally turn that off, if you are just like, I'm not going to bother to really like interact in a meaningful or productive way with anyone, if they say some stupid shit, then there are people, and I think there are a lot of people who are fans of anime and are very willing to learn and interested in learning stuff about anime, that they're not getting that because people who know shit about anime are just kind of take this generally dismissive, caustic attitude towards them, and everything just kind of ends up falling apart as a result.
Yeah, the problem I see with like the gatekeeping or whatever, if you want to put it, is more like a problem of cynicism than anything else. It's just like you've essentially given up on engaging with the community, because like the thing about communities is it requires like a certain baseline of trust, right?
Yeah.
I trust that you want to engage in this fandom in good faith and want to learn more about it or whatever.
Right. Obviously, and a lot of people like that were like, you were getting into it with on Twitter are people who are just like, I don't trust these people. They want to come in and change anime. And it's like, just like a very like
it's a short-sighted thing, because it's like, like there are probably people that you will engage with who will just not change their mind, but you're not really.
It's not everyone. Certainly, in my experience, those people are generally in the minority.
And even like on because we're talking about like posting on Twitter specifically. Yeah, you're not necessarily having that discussion specifically for the person you were replying to.
No,
there's a whole bunch of people that are like reading this conversation that you might influence.
Yeah,
that you're just not like actively engaging with or actively aware of. But like people like that don't really think about that.
Yeah, and that's like a general like this mindset I try to have, especially when posting on Twitter, is I want to be educational, I want to be informative, I want, even if they don't, even if there's some people who aren't, tweets that get like 1,000 views, that's like 1,000 people that have like seen that tweet, and I would hope that at least some of them see that tweet, read it, and they come away with something. So that's kind of like anytime I'm interacting, anytime I'm addressing any sort of like culture war stuff, anything really, it doesn't even necessarily need to be like culture war stuff. I kind of want people to have some sort of take. I hope people learn something from what I have to say.
I mean, we've talked about like YouTube stuff kind of being a black pill in a way, because like you'll see a video that's just completely full of misinformation that gets hundreds of thousands of views.
For an example, someone saying that, there weren't a lot of original anime for Evangelion, and then Evangelion, there were a lot more original anime afterwards.
Yeah, something like that's not even like. The weird thing about that is it's not. I see where you're trying to say.
Yeah.
It's like there's not a completely incorrect sentiment there, but you're not saying it.
We need to hammer that out. Take that back to the drawing board. Work on it a little bit more.
Put it back in the oven.
Starting point.
Let it cook.
Let it cook a little bit. Don't just say shit as soon as it comes to your mind. That's what podcasts are for.
And it's like, I get it. Like that, seeing that can be a black pill where you're like, well, what the fuck is the point?
Right. Oh, but yeah, 100%.
It's like a community thing is like, you kind of just have you have to accept at some point that you are never going to have like this massive influence of it. Like, I think I was actually talking about this kind of with like, we were talking about Kendrick Lamar.
Mm-hmm. As white people do.
Yeah, as white people do. Someone was talking about like how they thought Kendrick Lamar thought that To Pimp a Butterfly was going to have more of a cultural impact somehow, or like be more.
He's going to save the world.
Something like that, if you basically. And it's like, no, like at the end of the day, Kendrick Lamar is just making music. At the end of the day, we're just talking about anime. Yeah. But like you can you're not going to like just change somebody's life. You're not a fucking doctor taking a tumor out of someone's skull, right? Like you're not going to just impact somebody's life on a large scale. So you just kind of have to accept like what little influence that you have within that space on whoever you can have it on, right?
Yeah. It's to quote a tweet that popped off recently. It's anime, guys. It's not that serious.
It ain't that deep.
Don't take it that seriously. You know, we're not doing anything that like just super improves the world or whatever. We're not finding cures for cancer here. We're talking about cartoons, and cartoons are awesome. God damn it.
Yeah, it's like I don't want to like take out a con. Like it's like it's not like diminishing.
No, it's putting it in a specific context where it's like, I mean, I at the same time, I will tell people like, okay, guys, come on, it's anime. It's not that serious. But then I will fucking berate people who then like are just completely dismissive of anime and just be like, what the fuck are you talking about? What do you mean anime isn't good anymore? I want to fucking beat your ass.
The problem is like people don't really want to put in the work because it's such a low payoff, right? Like they kind of just want to be on the level of like a 1 million subscriber YouTuber. But even then, you might influence people with like misinformation where they like, you will have thousands of people that are just like, hey, remember when they ran out of budget for Evangelion? And you're just like, okay.
Yeah, I heard that's why the last episode of Gunbuster was in black and white. They ran out of money for color film. Okay,
I get it. You watched the recent video from Big YouTuber Man or whatever the fuck. But like, it does. You don't need that, right? Like ultimately, these fandoms cycle through and cycle out. People stop engaging with it. Like, what was the life cycle of an average anime fan? Like 2 years.
I mean, again, then we have to define anime fan there, and it's probably much shorter by now.
Well, but I mean, like in the statistic or whatever that is, like actually given, right? Because that was
people get into anime and like they're like late teens, early 20s, probably won't be that into it by the time they turn 30, and if they are, they're probably stuck with it for long term.
Yeah, at that point you're stuck with like you're
locked in and your life is over. You might as well, just quote unquote reset to say it in a way that YouTube will.
Why do you do this? What did I do to you? But yeah, like you just have to like accept, like if you want to have a positive influence in this space, that like there are going to be people that are just going to be fucking misinformed, and they're probably going to be like statistically, it's more likely they are not going to be around in 2 years, right? They're not going to be engaged in the space in this capacity anymore. So you can have whatever influence you have, and it's like it's an exponential thing, right? Like if you influence one person to kind of see things more from your perspective, from just their standard, like, oh, I watched Naruto and thought it was cool, and they kind of embark on that journey because this is one person, and like they are able to like spread that to like whoever they talk to or whatever. Not even necessarily like people start following them and doing the same, but like just you have that sort of mentality out there in the world and people are seeing it and engaging with it. That is a positive influence. That's a tangible thing. Granted, you're not going to be able to see it like fucking misinformation on a million view YouTube video or something, but it's something that it's a net good that you're doing for the community that will benefit in the long run. And people just kind of give up on that. They just like,
and to anime to an extent is also, it's a self-regulating process. Like, who was that guy? Like there's some guy that was like calling Chibi a pedophile. Put Chibi in the thumbnail for this episode, by the way. Calling Chibi a pedophile because like he tweeted something out about Marin from Dress Up Darling. And it's like, okay, if that's something you take issue with, you're probably just not gonna be an anime fan you're gonna hit, and this is something we've talked about quite a bit, where you're gonna hit a barrier at some point where you need to almost, if you want to keep watching anime, if you want to keep this sort of interest you have in anime going, you need to an extent reordinate your preferences and the way you look at anime to be conducive to that. Now, that can range from anything from, not having as much of an issue with fan service. And there are a lot of anime fans who you talk to them and they're like, they say that fan service was initially like a big turnoff for them, but something they just kind of got adjusted and acclimated to over time.
Right.
And it's like we were talking about in the last episode as well, where it's like, if you want to keep watching anime, if you want to get really into anime, then you can't just be constantly expecting big Sakuga stuff in every kind of show. And if you want to appreciate the animation aspects of anime, there are certainly ways to do so, but it's going to require you to look at anime from a different perspective. If you want to get to the point where it's like you've seen like 1,000 anime plus, then odds are you're doing so because you look at an anime in a very specific way and you notice things and think about things in ways a lot of people aren't, and you're capable of appreciating those things as a result.
Well, not even that you're looking at it very specific, but you're able to see it from different ways.
Yeah,
right.
There are there are things there for those with eyes to see.
Going back to the Cthulhu thing.
Oh, of course, yeah.
You got to get your inside up.
Yeah. So yeah, to that extent, anime is just like a self-regulating process, just by its own. Anything is like that, really. If you want to keep getting into this sort of thing, you're gonna need to start. You can engage with it one way at the start, but if that way isn't necessarily conducive to you getting even more into that thing, then it's either like you stop, you hit a barrier, and you're like, I've seen all the anime I need to see, and then that's it. Or you're like, I want to see more, but in order to do that, I need to like shift my perspective, shift my mindset, the way I'm thinking about anime.
Well, you see it perfectly, like for anybody that's just not really into anime on that level that's listening, like you see it perfectly with like film and stuff, right?
Yeah.
Like kids watch movies, they're like, oh, it was so cool. You see fucking Frozen? And she was like, or whatever the fuck. And then you watch more movies and eventually you're like, oh yeah, I really liked that whole character arc with Tony Stark. I thought that was a pretty fitting conclusion to his story. If you continue to watch movies on a consistent basis, at some point you're getting into it where you're like, well, I don't think it looked as good as these other movies, and you just get deeper and deeper and deeper into how you're
it's like that with anime content on YouTube as well. Like, would you describe yourself as a fan of AniTube, Mumi? Because you watch a lot of AniTube, probably more than like there are people who just like they watch like Giga or listen to Trash Dish, whatever the hell, watch Scamboli reviews. That's it. There aren't a lot of people like us who are like actively seeking things out. That's because, someone who watches like, Giga or Scamboli reviews or whatever, they're watching it not necessarily out of like an interest in other perspectives, other ways other people look at things. They're interested in, well, how does Giga look? What are Giga's thoughts on the show? What are Scamboli's thoughts on this show? Whereas like,
I don't even know if they care about their thought. I think they just want to be entertained.
Yeah, it's like, oh, they're gonna have some funny bits for this video, for this show.
I think I'm a fan of the idea of what AniTube could have been. First off, I think
diplomatic way to say that.
Well, first off, I think AniTube is dead. I feel like AniTube is a very specific thing from like 2015, 16-ish to.
Oh God, yeah, no, yeah. So many of those like those old guys are just not around anymore. Some of them dead. Some of them.
Well, that style of content is just dead too.
Oh, that style, yeah.
It's just
no one's making those like old style Trixie videos like 2016 anymore, where they're like 7 minutes long.
Yeah, I would say
it has like just a point that they just kind of like thought up of and wrote a script for, and that was it.
If you're just saying AniTube in the context of just like anime YouTube, obviously
people
that's
who are
not
making
dead.
Analytical videos about anime on YouTube.
Well, I would say AniTube is like very specific kind of analytical.
Right.
If you're saying AniTube as far as just like making anime content on YouTube, so like not even analytical, but like
just
comedic, AMVs, manga collections, anime. You could say that's all anime YouTube, right?
Yeah.
In that sense, I'm a fan of what I think AniTube could have been, in the sense of sharing different perspectives and being able to build on them. Obviously, that was never going to be a thing, because just the general person that's going to be talking about anime is not going to be into anime on that level where they can be transformative in that way.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you even saw with like AniTube content back in the day, a lot of it was, it's like, it was a growing pain thing. I'm not going to say like they were all like
on the shoulders of giants, Mumi.
Not really. All right, I'm gonna separate myself here from that. Okay,
but we exist on the shoulders of 5'6" giants.
Honestly, I don't even know if that is even I feel like that whole generation just like kind of fucked everyone coming after them. So
yeah, well, I can see that.
They kind of, if they got successful, they ladder pulled. If they didn't, they just dropped off, and there was like no transition. There was no like passing of the torch or baton or anything. Like, it's just like, well, we're gone. And then like any content creator came after that's like just crab in the bucket while the fucking people just pull the ladder behind them. But like that's a whole other subject. But obviously that style of content was like very specific, like review type content, and then you'd have like an essay in the sense of like, oh, Liz and the Bluebird was so impactful that every step had meaning, and you're just like, yeah, sure. But you never really got the widespread sort of level of like someone making a video on Bokusuma from last year where you're like, hey, this is a really interesting look at moe and kind of approaching it from a very specific angle, and then having somebody be able to approach it from an AI angle and be like, actually, that you can build on that and kind of utilize an expertise or fandom or
well, it was very, especially it was very like perspective driven, not necessarily research driven,
right?
It was just kind of like, these are things that I like thought of, and it's like, well,
why would be the ideal
thinking that in the first place? Where's that coming from? Let's talk about that a little bit.
Well, yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like that would be ideal if they like were building on that, and like you were able to like see different, because like that's the whole thing, right? Like anybody could go and watch fucking Bokusuma and just be like, oh yeah, this is made by Tezuka Productions, is directed by whoever directed the show. The animation was pretty stilted, and like just reviewing it from like how you find the writing, like, oh, the character dynamics are engaging, but it's not that deep or whatever the fuck, right? Anybody can like kind of do that at some point. It's not everybody can like look at it from a perspective of like I hesitate to say like otaku stuff, because that would be much easier to do than like, again, like an AI thing or something, like looking at it from a completely different perspective,
right,
than your average person is going to be watching it and seeing, right?
Like that Catholic priest guy who talks about Evangelion.
Yes. Roderick.
Yes, Father Roderick. Yeah. Stuff like that. Yeah, you weren't really getting a lot of that. I mean, you still don't really get a ton of that.
I mean, even him, like it's cool that he does it, but like there's still better content on it. Sure. Honestly.
But it's like, well, it's a similar issue to like, people talk about like, I am, in this review, I will assess the objective quality of this movie, and it's like, all right. so these are like the objective criteria you're working with. Where are you getting those criteria from? Like any sources? Are we citing anyone? It's just stuff that you thought up. You're not. Did you do any research? No, you didn't. Oh, how is this objective then? I'm lost.
Yeah, it's. I always wanted there to be more like curiosity in. So like you watch a show, you're like, hey, this really resonated with me. I wonder why.
People,
and you
yeah,
read
people
up on
actually
it.
like really like looking into stuff rather than just like, I watched the show and I really enjoyed it, and now I'm just going to spit out all the thoughts that I have and not really like refine them or research them or anything like that.
Yeah, that's what we do. All right, we're on a podcast.
That relates it. That's the difference between like a podcast and like a video essay, though. Is like, I mean, even to a certain extent, like, if you know, if we wanted to do that, we certainly could.
Oh yeah, I mean, I like to do that. I'm trying to do that.
Yeah,
it's
trying.
just trying.
But
that's the end of that sentence.
Oh,
I'm trying.
We're trying. But yeah, so yeah, you know, we'll probably talk about this more at a later. Like, this is not like, I don't want this to be like the definitive podcast episode on, you know, what makes an anime fan, or like media mixes or database consumption, anything like that. These are all super like complex, like nuanced issues that, I mean, shit, we could talk about this for ages, but I would love to have like other people on, obviously, to like talk about it. People like who know a fair amount about these things would be really cool.
It would be interesting to bring someone on who disagrees with us about gatekeeping.
This is true. We would love to have someone. Yeah, what we're talking about. Obviously, we have specific thoughts on like gatekeeping and stuff like that. So it would be good to like get someone on who obviously has like a different take on it from us, a different perspective. You know,
to be fair, I do think we have a different perspectives on, because like I took part in it in large part for you know, in certain places, whereas like
certain places that will not be named, yeah, we are legally not allowed to.
But I think like despite that, we kind of align where it's like we kind of went through different paths, but we came out at the same place.
Yeah. So yeah, it would be interesting to have someone on who's like, yeah, we need to do more to like gatekeep the anime community and stuff. This podcast feels like less of an echo chamber. So what we're saying is, Chibi, fucking respond to our goddamn Twitter DMs. God damn it.